Today we are joined by Sam Shingles, who is a recent graduate from the University of Leicester, who studied planetary science and physics. Thank you for joining us today, Sam. How was your experience studying space science, and how was university life in Leicester?
Yeah, so it's a strange one really, because growing up, I wasn't the best at sort of science and the sort of complicated sort of subjects that you studied at school initially, but I always found them really interesting, and sort of watching sort of science programs, learning new facts and stuff like that was happening on TV was always something that was quite fun. And then as I got older, it started to click a little bit more. I saw the merge between sort of like maths and the other sciences, and they started to click a bit and the puzzles started to sort of connect a bit. And I was lucky enough that my school did an A-level in geology, and I also did the physics A-level, and I kind of enjoyed blending the two of those together, and that's kind of then where I took it and found sort of a degree that kind of was that merge of the two, which was the planetary science element, where you could sort of learn about sort of minerals and stuff, but then also look a little bit further into space and understanding like that. And Leicester has something like over 61 years now probably of space research, so it was sort of sung out as one of the good places to go for that type of study, basically.
So planetary science, that was obviously to do with planets in space, but also to do with like home-based geology. It was kind of like the geology of Earth and how you can kind of extrapolate that for planets, planetary bodies.
So that more happened in the research side of the course. So like when I was doing projects in my third year and fourth year, you could I was working on a research project that was using a Raman spectrometer. It sounds a little bit complicated, but it's basically an instrument that's going to be on the new ExoMars rover, which is going to launch hopefully in 2022, I think it is now. And what we were doing in that research was actually using Earth samples that were sort of mimicked what it would be like on Mars. So it was quite interesting that you could use rocks that are found here on Earth to try and replicate another planet. And so you kind of had to understand what Earth rocks are like in the first place to be able to match them to what a Martian rock could be like.
So it's kind of, you quite like the puzzle solving, it seems. Like you quite like that there's a bit of a mystery and you have these pieces and people don't really know how they fit together just yet, but at some point you might learn, you might just find that piece that just sort of links them all together. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's what people like about science, if you know what I mean. Admittedly, these days, maybe the new revelations are something that are slightly further afield and slightly more abstract, with sort of things like that happening at sort of the Large Hadron Collider, if you know what I mean. It's quite hard to initially understand that, but the thing that excited me the most was, we're living on a planet, yet we still don't necessarily know how it came in this area or why. I think that's sometimes what's quite nice about sort of space science and planetary science, is that you are asking quite a profound question, which is sort of how have we even come to be in the place that we are, if you know what I mean. So it's quite an interesting sort of area to think about sometimes. So that was kind of the quite interesting bits, was always these problems that still not yet to know, and are quite, I think as well, it's sometimes, space can be one of these things that is really quite complicated, but in actual fact, some of the questions that are the most profound are sometimes some of the most simplest, which is why are we here, or did something else exist somewhere else, even though the connotations later on are very complex. But in actual fact, the question itself that you start with is actually a very just basic one, which I always found was quite interesting to sort of explore, and that was always fun to see if like different solutions to that sort of question.
So you said previously that you may not have been a traditional kind of like science student kind of back at school, but was it always something that you were interested in? Did you always quite like the idea of studying space? And how did you find, like, quite often you need maths and physics. Like, was that quite hard work learning? Like I did I did A-level maths and I struggled a lot with it. And then I did zoology. So yeah, I moved away slightly from kind of the maths and physics side of it. But yeah, how did you find that aspect of it?
So yeah, as I said, I wasn't traditional scientist at school. I would say my maths was the worst subject possible, and I don't know quite. It was some, for me. It's always been a case of you kind of have to work. You have to work hard to be able to see the rewards of that type of say like with maths. So yeah, I was not very good, getting very low grades in maths, and so it had to be something that I really took some time out to be like, okay, if this is something I want to go into, because as I said, I liked watching some of the programs that was going on TV about sort of space and science, and I was like, okay, so if it is something that I am genuinely interested in, how do I get there? And it was a case of really having to take the time out, work hard, and sort of keep doing the maths, and the rest will fall into place. And it actually ended up that maths became, it was almost as if I got dropped on my head or something, because it all got clicked into place, and maths became the best subject, and everything else followed afterwards, basically. So I think for me the case was, if you just work hard at something, it did fall into place. The harder stuff is that you kind of have to do the hard work in other areas that might not necessarily be your initial interest, but in actual fact, once you have to get quite a good understanding of them, and once you get to that stage as well, you realize that there are other things that you are interested in as well. So in a physics degree, you had to be able to do some of the research projects, you had to be able to do sort of some coding and stuff like that. And as I said before going into it, coding was not necessarily something I was hugely interested in, and kind of was thrown in at the deep end to try and be able to achieve the project that I was really interested in. But now realizing that I have gained those skills, it's actually been really useful for doing things like sort of creating different data charts for different, even just very basic things. Being able to have those skills behind you is really, really beneficial.
It's been very multidisciplinary. Like from learning these physics and maths, you've gone into coding, and they all kind of work together, but they also branch out into like other fields.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a funny example was I was doing a year 3 research project, and it was about, as I touched upon earlier, it was about sort of using this spectrometer that was on the Mars rover. But what we were doing was actually seeing what the signature would be for, say, some plant life that was on it. And so me and my partner, we went across to the biology department, which apparently was unheard of from the physics department to branch across. But we ventured the distance a few meters away, and got speaking to a different department. And that's where they taught us so much about sort of biology, microbes, that I don't have a background in through my degree, but is a fundamental for what we were trying to work out. So I think it is important, and it sometimes gets lost, that once you do, if you say do a subject like physics, or if you do a subject like geology, biology, like there's so many opportunities to be able to, start to mix and match, if that's actually something that you're really interested in.
Throughout your degree, you started moving into more science communication kind of like activities. You did quite a lot of outreach to do your degree, and you did some science writing. Do you want to stick with science communication within the field of space science, or would it be something that you'd like to branch out into other topics, or do you have a soft spot for space science?
I'd say I probably have a soft spot for space science. That's just because I've built up so many years sort of
your knowledge is, I suppose. Yeah,
exactly. And the thing with science communication, and I kind of in my head, as I touched upon, science was not something that came easy straight away to me, and it was people getting me interested through other means rather than just the bog standard sort of what's in the textbook in the course type thing. It was seeing stuff on TV, going to see people deliver fun experiments or talks and stuff like that. So I kind of want to use what I've been use my knowledge and be able to give back in that sense to help, you know, other people see it the same way that I do, because I know that it is quite easy to get disenfranchised with sort of physics and if you're interested in planetary science, there is not that much opportunity in, say, the course sometimes in, say, the school courses to be able to explore that in as much detail as you might want to. So having these sort of external maybe sources, or just being able to get interested in through other means, is something that helped me, and I would like to be able to give back. But I've started to now branch out in more general science a little bit, but yeah, I do have quite a soft spot for the space element, at least.
I suppose, yeah, you're quite lucky because your school offered these sort of alternative science degrees, I suppose, but a lot of schools don't. Like, I didn't have the option to do geology or anything like that. And yeah, space just seems like it's a little bit like dinosaurs. It seems like a gateway into science for quite a lot of, especially young kids and that sort of thing. But do you think just having these alternative, like these science communication sort of engagement activities are just a good way of sort of branching out and kind of like, yes, the space science is really interesting, but it's literally out in space. It's kind of, it feels a little out of your reach, if you pardon the pun a little bit, but I don't know, having these science communication events, do you think it kind of grounds it kind of like, yeah, these are topics that you can learn about and you can go into?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying, in the sense of, yeah, my school was really lucky to have that I had the opportunity to do the geology, and there was only 5 of us that took that course, so it was very, very small. And so even then, even though it was offered, not many people took it because it's not something that is as probably readily available to, or people knew much about before they took it. And you're kind of right in the sense that I think planetary science, I think the first time you come up in planets is quite young in the school course, yet it doesn't get too much touched upon until quite later on again. So it's kind of, you get initially quite excited and then it kind of goes away a bit. So I feel like some of these science communication events can kind of show you where it potentially leads up. You know, you could speak to people that have experience in that area, are currently doing sort of quite interesting and wacky research to do with that area. And as I say, you might think it's all about planets, but there might be things about stars that you like, or in actual fact, you know, a huge field about space is actually, you know, looking back at the Earth, if you know what I mean, by doing sort of Earth observation, which is one of the most important things that people use space sort of research about right now. So I think it's sort of important that these sort of events happen, that you can actually understand that there's so many different avenues that you can take within sort of, yeah, my personal field, which is sort of planetary science and space science, but there's within sort of these 3 main subjects of physics, chemistry, biology, you know, there's so many different sort of options that you can take, and understanding that through those sort of events, that it's not just one black or white, is quite nice.
That sounds great. Thank you for joining us today. I think we've ran out of time a little bit, but I have my one last question. Do you have a favorite space fact that you'd like to share with everyone today?
Okay, yeah. So the one I like to say is about astronauts, which they often say, astronauts that have been to the moon often say it actually smells like gunpowder. So Buzz Aldrin said that the moon smelled a bit like gunpowder. But how do you think that they actually know what it smells like? Because they can't
say they have the helmet on. You'd be like, yeah, I don't know.
So they wouldn't be taking their helmets off. Unfortunately, that would be a bit of a fatal error on their half, and they are trained to to not do that. It's actually when they go back into the craft and they take off their suits smell residually of the moon.
Yeah, all the dust is just coming off them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that smells like gunpowder.
Ah, great. That's a great fact. I like that a lot.